Hello again and a very good evening to you. Welcome to sweet Omagh Town Internet Radio, our little weekly podcast. And by the magic of radio, I look to my right and I see my co-presenter, Declan Ford. Okay, it is Tuesday, the 22nd of September at 4 o'clock. And sitting across with a smile on his face because he doesn't have to come back here for at least 6 weeks.
6 months, maybe.
My co-presenter, Mr. Ford. Good evening.
Oh, yeah. Well, you have me until 2 minutes to 6. Then I leave and I get on that bicycle and I cycle up the road as quick as I can. And
Like Cinderella.
I take my glass slippers with me, and things will change drastically from 6 o'clock.
You were in our sweet Omagh Town today.
I was in Omagh Town today, and I was just walking about, but it was a wee bit, and the weather wasn't great. But just walking about and thinking, things have changed to date, and things are going to change again, And the town kind of takes on, on the one hand, it's the same old town, but, it's that sense of change, it's a bit like, that cartoon series, The Simpsons, right? And they live in Springfield. But their alter egos live in Shelbyville. And Shelbyville is basically Springfield with modifications and changes. And almost a wee bit like that now. There's a sort of, not saying a pall has descended, but I think people are, it's like people who want to be nurses and doctors and surgeons, when they put on the mask, when they're playing the part. And when you look at all these people walking around the town with their masks, and you suddenly realise they're not playing a part, it's reality.
Mm-hmm.
I must tell you, I was in a certain shop today, I'll not mention the shop's name, and there were a number of people without masks. Isn't that strange?
Maybe due to health conditions, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, you give people the benefit of the doubt.
Oh, that's my generosity.
Your generosity knows no bounds.
But I see myself sometimes, I can go into main supermarkets, right, always wear a mask, but if I nip into the local filling station to get a few pound of diesel in the car or something, I find myself in the garage and sometimes no mask.
Maskless.
Exactly. And I run back and I say, sod this. You go back in the car and you're looking through the front pocket for this
mask, this one-off mask that you've worn a dozen or so times.
Absolutely, yes. Don't need washing.
Well, I have purchased a linen mask, a olive green linen mask, 4 layers of linen. Mm-hmm. And it can be washed every night.
You will.
I tell you. And my daughter, who teaches geography, she sent a photograph of her and the other teachers in the department, and they're all wearing masks with maps of the world on them. So if you were to wear a mask, what would you wear? If you were to one, you have to wear one, say, full time.
Yes.
What would you wear? What would be on it?
I would wear it as a nappy.
A nappy.
That's what I talked through.
The happy nappy. Yeah, well, what is in the nappy and what you speak are pretty much the same.
I don't know. It's become a fashion item now for people, isn't it, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I actually had to go to the dentist yesterday, and a very, very good dentist he is too. And there were the hygienists were there, and they were wearing masks, and there seemed to be to me, it looked like a radio piece, but there's something at the side, whether it's to let air circulate or not. It was very, very strange.
Strange times.
But I was saying to the young girl, there was a shiver run down my spine because they were dressed in all their PPE gear, and they were swaddled, and they had this dark green kind of big apron wrapped around them, and I was instantly brought back to 1960s in Newry. At the dentist. And there was a dentist there. And you remember Tony Hart, the Vision On, the guy who did art on children's television? He designed,
yes, I remember him, yeah. Yes.
He designed the original Blue Peter logo.
Yep. Right.
And this guy was the spit of him, whereas Tony Hart was affable and pleasant. This dentist obviously was not.
Right.
And I remember I was sitting and squirming in the chair because I think I had to get a tooth extracted. And I suppose I lost the plot as a child. And, nowadays they would soothe you and talk to you. What did he do? He hit me a smack in the face. And he was wrapped in it was almost like, a big, thick, heavy rubber green apron. And I can still remember the smell of that rubber in the apron. And then, of course, you had the gas. And then, that kind of bladder.
Yes, I know.
Black bladder.
Mm-hmm.
And the smell of the gas.
I remember having gas as a child as well. But
Right.
It was a horrible experience because you'd be very sick afterwards. I know I was.
That's right. Aye, that's right. And
The
yeah,
doctor, I think the doctor had to be on call or be about when that was given to you.
right.
Probably was, but you wouldn't have.
And
known.
you would have thought, that I suppose it was, it required the services of an anaesthetist,
Yes. Yes.
But I still vividly remember that's gone back. That's slightly less than 60 years ago. And yesterday brought me back to it, and so I was just telling the young girls, and they thought it was very amusing.
Yes.
Needless to
It's like
say,
the smell of methylated here.
Ah, yes.
I'm back in the Dr. McMullen's surgery.
That's right.
in John Street.
And you know what I remember? When you're getting an injection, the cotton wool comes out, and then the methylated spirits are on, and it was just the cold of the methylated
You knew
spirits,
what was
and
coming,
you knew something was going to happen. And then you were sitting studying this needle, and it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger as you looked at it.
Getting closer and closer.
It was like drilling for oil.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
Do you know, I must tell you, I was very cruel as a child. I was very cruel.
I have news for you.
But what?
Still are.
Bum bum. My younger brother, was brought into hospital with appendicitis, and he had to have the appendix removed. And I went to see him the night before, and I proceeded to tell him about the surgeons and the rusty saws. And I thought he was being very amusing and
Oh,
funny.
of course, your idea of witness
When
was
you're
it?
9 years of age, and to this day I regret it. But there's no lasting harm on him anyhow, He's
lived to tell
alive
the
and
tale.
kicking and living and twicking him.
My goodness.
You know.
But anyway, on a serious note, I think there's a lot of fear knocking about because people don't know where the future is at this stage. They're just very much on a day-to-day basis. And,
Yeah.
Well,
that's it, and it's the great unknown.
Yes.
And I suppose there are all kinds of scare stories to kind of make people, I suppose, just take care. But I just hope it doesn't bring out the worst in people, This idea of informing on your neighbours and, things like that.
Yeah.
And,
No, I don't think so. I think people around this part of the world,
we rally together.
yeah, we think we'll
Goodness
get
sake,
through it.
know.
As I said in an earlier program, we're well used to not speaking to each other for weeks on end. So it's just a matter of walking past you in the street.
That's right.
Look the other way.
That's right, exactly. But no, walking up the town today, it was, just looking around, and maybe it's just the weather's changed and it's getting grey.
Grey day, isn't it? Everything's with grey looking right off.
Aye, but just looking at the changes, and just down up the main street and down the same street, and
Right.
looking at the Royal Arms.
You were going to turn the clock back tonight, Mr. Ford.
Absolutely, I hope so. And take me back to that great hotel.
Yes, pre-war. Yeah.
Pre-war. Which war are we talking about now?
Well, part of it will be about around the Second World War. It'll not be you and I'll not be talking in this little program at all.
Yes.
Some considerable years ago, the late Dr. Haldane Mitchell
Yeah.
and myself and the late Tommy Clarke got together for a chat. I recorded this interview with them. And, Jack, I never heard it till fairly recently. I went through it one night and I thought this will be a nice one for the time of year that's in. Mm-hmm. Tommy Clarke was such an institution in Omagh, based in the Royal Arms. His career there spanned over 60 years.
Yeah. Oh, I remember him. You would have seen him when there was a wedding on, and he was there in his crisp white shirt and his black bow tie, and the crease in his trousers that would put like a paper cut on you.
Yes.
If you put your hand along. And he was very solicitous, very much the general factotum, and very much part of the Royal Arms.
The establishment there. And, the thing is that for after dinner speeches and things, he was the man there to bring around the microphone and introduce the speakers.
And to keep people right.
Oh, very much.
Which at a wedding you need, you think of, maybe for some people from years ago, going out to, a wedding was maybe the first formal occasion that they would have had. But the way he would just have guided people and, just kept them right, all very discreetly, So he's sadly missed, he was very much part of the town.
He's missed, and that hotel is missed. The civility of the place, the general meeting place for people to come at home. I don't know why nothing has really replaced it in the way that it should have.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, I'm sure Tommy talked about, hotels in their heyday and the clientele.
Yes, he did.
And where there was a kind of a steady trade. Mm-hmm. And, you had, in a way, occupations that have vanished.
This is it. Yeah.
You know, like the commercial travellers.
Yes, that whole area is gone. Yeah.
You
Tommy
know.
was a great man for looking after the travellers. Would have collected them from the railway station in those days and brought them down. Or on some occasions when they had cars, we would have parked the cars in the garage for them and things. In this interview, he actually talks about the hotel, the building itself, the adjacent buildings and things, long gone, and for many people out of their memory as well. But I hope it will maybe rekindle a feel of the Omagh that it was, and it's a very nice conversation. And it's just two men having a chat, sadly no longer with us. And I think, you know, the art of conversation in this town is something that you and I maybe appreciate, and maybe most people do, but sometimes don't do it enough, or feel they don't do it enough. you
Yeah,
know.
but you know, looking back, wasn't it so far-sighted of Haldane Mitchell to start that series of books that he did through
Oh,
Rotary?
great,
you
great.
know, you know that those books are invaluable.
They really are. And you know, the modern day version that Mark McGrath runs on his Facebook site are equal. And some of the photographs that he has unearthed, you know, would it's just really it can be it's a great feeling to see something like that you remember. He's very kind to give me some photographs of the Royal Arms here as well,
lovely.
inside and outside.
Yeah.
So it'll sort of add a bit of colour to it. But I think those are memories, and those are good to look at, especially in these dark times. I think to look back, we're still looking back to see where we are and what we want to do, you know.
Oh yeah. I look forward to hearing it, you know, because Tommy, he had such a distinctive voice.
Hadn't it just?
Oh yeah, and you know, and I vividly can see him, you know, just standing almost like Alfred Hitchcock, you know, you would see the profile, you know, and always so well turned out.
Yes.
Oh, just and as I say, very kind of just another world.
Yeah.
You know, and the hotels in Omagh, you think they've changed over the years, you know, and that kind of that kind of form of hostelry has kind of dramatically changed.
That whole thing, that business has changed. You know. Sadly, I think with this latest pandemic, it'll probably change even more. You know, I fear that some of the pubs and clubs may not survive this. You know,
Yeah.
But let's hope and pray they do at this stage, and we move on and we move past it. And as an aside, do you remember we visited the county club in the early days?
I do indeed.
Do you remember that?
Oh, do you know what my distinct memory? The Edwardian type leather seats,
Yes, the club chairs
the club chairs,
and the big oil paintings.
and the oil paintings, and the smell of turf burning,
Oh yes.
and and also the visitors' book.
And you know, that's the second oldest gentleman's club in Ireland outside Dublin.
My goodness.
And do you know what I'd love? To get back and take another look at it. But I rang them a few times, but it goes to voicemail. I'm not sure who's in charge, but I'd love to. The interview you have, it's short in length but high in quality.
Oh yes,
It was recorded with
It's the late
Mervyn Archdale.
Mervyn Archdale.
That's
And do you ever? And he was very amusing.
He was
Remember, he
quite funny.
talked about ladies being admitted into the club and how they eventually succumbed.
how to give in, yeah.
And also then just actually talked us through the view from the courthouse down to
Yes,
the
okay.
Bridge Street, and then he
Yes,
was talking about you know
Yeah.
various political meetings that were held over
Yes.
the Troubles.
Yes.
And you know how some of the inmates of the club would actually sit and watch what was going on. You know,
It's one of these buildings that very few people in Omagh have really had access to because it's obviously a private club. But I would, you know, it's well known in the town as well, and the patrons are probably well known. And he would have said that in the early days, that's what the grand jury would have said.
oh yeah,
You
yeah.
know, so
But do you remember he showed us one of the bedrooms or the cells, for want of
Yes,
a better word?
yes.
And I tell you, luxury would not be a word you
Not be a
associate
word,
with it. It
no.
was like something out of the worst of Tom Brown's school days. You know, a single iron bed, and I think maybe a chair, and maybe I think there might have been a little bedside cabinet. And that was it.
I'm not sure, you know, whether they've moved on from that. I'm not sure if they do overnight stays and things.
Yeah.
But I know they're probably open for private functions and things as well.
I mean, it's a lovely,
Oh, it's a
beautiful
lovely
venue.
venue.
I'd love to get back in again.
Wouldn't they? You know?
So if anybody from the county club is listening, or if you know anybody from the county club,
We want to look
just
back.
say we want to get back in again.
We'll bring a little tape recorder and we'll wear a mask.
And we will wear a mask. Yes, absolutely,
be good to
absolutely.
look around at it.
Yeah, I would love to get back in there again. You know,
Yes.
You know, but maybe we'll see how things go.
We never know what comes round the corner of us, Declan, day in and day out.
That's it.
So, unfortunately, this could be your last little visit to me here because
Well, I think it might be phones only.
Yes.
You know, and well, we'll see. We'll see. You know, when you least expect it, I could come rapping that door, or like wee Willie Winky tapping the window, peeping through the lock. You know.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh yeah.
No, it
But
is.
again, this could be a temporary measure. But you know what? Better to err on the side of caution.
Well, you know,
Keep safe.
human life is sacred, and you know we have to watch ourselves and watch our family and friends and neighbours seriously. So we'll do what they ask us at this stage, despite what we might think or feel.
Yes, or what? Yeah, what you want. You just better to, as I say, better to be safe than sorry. And there's a lot in that.
There is.
You know.
And you're all invited to the Royal Arms Hotel tonight in the company of the late Haldane Mitchell and Tommy Clarke as they recall his long career in the Royal Arms Hotel. And to see you again, take good care of yourselves. Bye.
Would you like to tell me when you started in the Royal Arms?
Well, that's very simple, Doctor, because I can distinctly remember it was Omagh Fair Day in April 1937. To be correct, the 6th of April 1937. And Omagh Fair Day was held on the fourth Tuesday of each month. Now, my duties when I first started was to go upstairs and clean bedroom windows. Well, I was an active youth in those days. Heights meant nothing to me. But down below in the yard, my entertainment was farmers trotting horses up and down and testing their wind. Well, I was more interested in the capers of that than I was in the cleaning of the windows. But however, I got past. I then had to bring up coal, put on fires, clean travellers' shoes, make cups of tea for them at night, and do various other things that one would do about their own personal house. I thought I would stay about a fortnight because I couldn't see a great future in this. But as time went on, I began to take a little liking for it, inasmuch as the barristers on circuit stayed in the Royal Arms for the assizes, which would last approximately a week. Well, now those barristers were very nice gentlemen, and I learned a lot, inasmuch as making their suppers and bringing them the odd glass of milk and whatever. And as I began to pick up the bits and pieces, my superior told me that I would have to wait up on two senior barristers that were out visiting, and instructed me on one particular gentleman that I would have to undress him and put him to bed. Well, that was quite an experience, I can tell you. And mentioning no names, he's gone to heaven, I hope, and he was quite a character, there's no doubt about it. The next item was war broke out. Well, that changed things somewhat. You see, Jim Britton, who was my senior, he was in the position of looking for another job. He applied for the hotel in Enniskillen, the Imperial, by the way, and got it, which left his job open. At that time, I had learned to drive the hotel van and was fit to do most things that he would have done himself. So he hinted to me, if you're interested in my job, apply. I did so, and Mr. McElveen, who was the manager at that time, gave me the job, but not alone that, I had to cover then the duties that I would do myself for a period of a couple of weeks until they got someone else. Well, it was quite a busy time. I can remember quite well. I went to the 10 o'clock train on a Monday morning, starting, and quite a bit of snow, and they came about 20 travellers off that, and they all reached me there night cases or whatever, but personal belongings, and tried to sort that out. From one thing to another, I picked up the job. Well, I forgot about staying for the fortnight. War broke out. The American Red Cross were in possession of the hotel, taken over by the British Minister of Finance. Now, the American Red Cross, that meant that all commercial travellers ceased to exist as customers. It was then, solely for the comfort of American troops. All hotel furniture was taken out and replaced with bunk beds to the tune of, it would then, instead of accommodating about 35 travellers, there was double the amount of troops. And a busy weekend, there would be probably 70. Well, I was kept on, and not alone, doing duties something similar to what I was doing in the hotel. In addition, the American Red Cross had taken over the grand jury room in the quarters, and they ran dances, and I was put on the door. It wasn't a very pleasant job because the American troops only had passes. British troops who were stationed at Lisnelly, the ITC, they would come to have a night out at the quarters and were refused permission, with the result that I had, to keep myself right, I had to send for the military police. Well, war ceased. The hotel got back into its old way of going, only much better. Travellers came out, big numbers. I was very, very busy, inasmuch as you had to do a good service to get them all back into line again. Travellers, I would take their keys from them when they would arrive at the hotel, put their car in the garage, and whatever shop they might be calling at the next morning, I would have their car parked at that shop. And if there was another traveller from an opposition firm staying in another hotel, he would spot that traveller's car at that certain shop, and he knew fine well that that traveller must be doing business in that shop. But I can assure you that that traveller was sound in his bed, where I had his car parked, and I denied that other gent the opportunity. Dr. Miller, who owned the hotel, was in the RAF. He retired out of the RAF and he started to practice in Church Street, Newton Ards, along with Dr. Cole. Time passed and we're reaching then 1959. Mr. D. Watterson, a local businessman, bought the Royal Arms and then, put new life in it entirely. He took over what was the old picture house, which was rented out to Mr. Donaghy, who owned the county picture house. The lease was up. Mr. Watterson turned round and got a local contractor, Mr. McGinn, to get at the work and turn it into a ballroom. In no time at all, we had the opening dance. That was for Tyrone Farmers Society, Omagh Show. I would be guessing the first Wednesday in July 1960. From then on, the Royal Arms was booming. Weddings, dinner dances, christenings, you name it. The catering was the first class. The Watterson family were a delight to work to. Good bosses in every way. If they were displeased with anything, they had a nice way of putting it over to you, and nobody was anything the worse. Now, I was getting to the stage that I was nearing, retirement. Well, retirement did come up. They condescended to give me a part-time job, which I still have, and perhaps some of these days I will retire fully. But I enjoy the company, the good crack, and everything else. And would we say it was the longest fortnight has been, because I have now topped the 60 years. It'll be 48 years in full time and working on the 13th in, should we say, retirement as such.
Who owned the hotel, Tommy, whenever you joined it in 1937?
Well, Doctor, I believe that Dr. Sam Porter Miller, who inherited the hotel, that would have been in 1937, he must have been finishing school, because it was common knowledge that when people arrived with a horse, and old Johnny Crawford was in the yard looking after these horses, a farmer with his horse and cart, it was known as Porter's Yard. Well, I question why was it called Porter's Yard when the picture house was called Miller's. Well, that was explained to me that John G. R. Porter owned the Royal Arms, he owned the yard and all that sort of thing. Not alone did he own it, but he ran an auctioneering business and he done undertaking. That's why this building at the bottom of the yard, which I was curious to know what it was known as the Coffin Loft. Well, I said, why do you call it the Coffin Loft? Oh, that's where the coffins were made. Well, not alone that, but there was a byre, which I was instructed to put coal. Of course, there were no cows, but there had been cows. I don't know who owned them, but there was lots of stables down the yard. I can remember the people that had taken those stables, Jimmy Winters for one, and Mr. Watterson of High Street, the coal merchant, had one as well. Old Jackson, the publican, he had one for bottling stout in. Hughes's bread carts had a garage there. Lilliput Laundry, and then there were 12 lock-up garages. And the famous character was in one which I got to know very well, Johnny McElroy. And he used to have this old Austin 16 car, and it full of all the horse harness of the day. And then the rest of the garages were taken up by local people in the town. The garages, by the way, were made up of old X-19 and 14-18 wooden huts. And not alone garages, there was one building in particular down Mullaghmore Band had it as a band hall, which I visited quite often. The picture house was run by Mr. Donaghy, but Mike Meehan and Barney Hunt were the two main men doing the picture house. Now, shops in the town, next door to me was W.J. Johnson's. We had Irwin's then up the High Street, Russell's. Across the way then, a grocery shop, there was Russell's, the boot shop as well. And the arcade, it was down at the Dublin Road.
Clemens's.
And chemist, there was Tommy Rutledge. And then there was Orr's, the jewellers, beside it, Bloomfield's, Barney O'Reilly's, Crawford and Crawford's, the men's outfitters only, Jack McMillan's, J.B. Anderson's, as I said, the arcade, and C.E. Anderson's, who's still in existence.
Well, let's change the subject slightly and go back to the transport you had from the hotel to the station.
Yeah.
What did you take your patrons in?
Well, the transport, the only transport up until 1950 was a Ford, 14.9 Ford with a flat body on it. And I can remember very well on VE Day, taking a flight of RAF boys on the back of it to the station with crates of beer, celebrating the war being over, on the back of this flat-bodied 14.9 Ford. Of course, perhaps I was breaking the law, but nobody cared that particular day. The flat body was very important because it brought all the skips. Now, these skips were large, what would we say, basket-type hampers, where all the travellers in the drapery end carried their wares. There were jewellery travellers, but they had different class of boxes altogether. But then, as the railway ended and the road extended from the M2 down and improved, and travellers, instead of being met at the station, had been brought down, and I must add that most of the travellers in those days were elderly men. Their place was taken by younger men driving modern cars with the samples in the back of the car, so that my job attending the station was fading out. It wasn't necessary, or you weren't rapped across the knuckles for not being at such and such a train. Each train in those days had to be attended. Not anymore, because the flow of traffic from Belfast and from Derry, travellers, reps of all descriptions, were coming by car. Then that further changed things a bit. Less travellers stayed overnight because the new road enticed them to, if they were living in the vicinity of Belfast or whatever, that a couple of gallons of petrol was cheaper than staying perhaps in the hotel. Troubles came too, and most travellers, especially Englishmen, were advised not to stay out of certain, or not to go to certain places, so that the whole scene, as far as the hotel was concerned, changed dramatically. The present day, there's not so many travellers now staying over, but it is still very busy with functions. And Mr. Watterson is retiring, and he's being replaced by his son Peter, who's doing quite a good job. And I must say that they have had their problems between fires and, what would we say, accidents. They came through with flying colours.
I'm sure, Tommy, you met many interesting people that visited the hotel.
Oh, yes. Yes. One night there was, what would we say, the solicitor's dinner, and there was a gentleman invited to it. He was then president of the Law Society or something. He'd taken up this job. But it turned out to be, anyway, a very high-ranking man in the war, and that was Colonel Blair Main, commonly known as Paddy Main. Well, this man was a very, very nice man, there's no doubt about it, and I was impressed now by that. And I was led to believe that he'd done quite a big job during the war. He'd got a lot of decorations. But the biggest surprise I got of all was one afternoon, a Saturday afternoon. This party arrived for afternoon tea, and they asked me to, I happened to be about the front, and happened to be Lord Louis Mountbatten and his party. So I duly showed them up. They're on their way through to Mullaghmore.
What about the transport in Omagh whenever you started to work, Tommy?
Well,
there was no bus depot?
There was no bus depot. There was a bus for Newton Stewart or Castlederg. It left in front of the YM. Well, that's now in the proximity of the Northern Bank or that new tourist office. That was where the YM was. Well, that's where all the young men of the town congregated and all that sort of thing. That there was the Derry bus, the Castlederg, Newton Stewart line left from there. Then the Belfast Ballagully bus. I don't know, they must have come down from the bus depot or bus garage. There was no bus depot as such. It left from Davy Young's. That was another character who had a greengrocer's shop and a barber's shop, and he was forever playing tricks on each and everybody about the town.
He was supposed to be in cahoots with Peter McAleer, the bicycle agent.
A Sloper McAleer is right.
Between the two of them,
Yes,
they held the town to ransom.
yes, is right. Well, Peter McAleer, he garaged his car in the Royal Arms after the horses had left. He got a car and he garaged in there. But the only horse-drawn vehicle in the late years was James Hamilton. That would be the father of Fred Hamilton's. He went round the country with a grocery cart and he would arrive in about 1 o'clock in the morning, and he garaged in.
Well, do you remember the tennis court being where the car park is today?
Down here?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes, I do. That was a field belonged to the Royal Arms. They laboured it for a while and grew some vegetables in it. Albert Armstrong, who was the gardener in Bellevue, that was the big residence up above where Miss Crawford had her home. He was the gardener to the hotel, and not alone that, he done part-time gardening around the town. Then the hotel sold off a piece of ground to the YM, and they had it for a tennis ground, but it didn't last all that long. A short-lived tennis ground.
It became then the old health clinic then, didn't it, during the war?
The old health clinic was a corrugated effort. Now where Johnson Park, Car Park, it might even the new road might be running through part of it.
Well, tell me, on a fair day, of course, the fairs were held up in the Cow Commons.
Yes.
Up there where Cunningham
Yes.
Terrace is today.
Yes.
But you would have had some of the farmers would have come down to eat in the Royal Arms.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Where did they eat?
John David Watson. Now, the only place value for money was that restaurant. Or how they got room in it, I don't know. It was not big as a travel office. But it was packed. Mm-hmm. And they would rush down, and then a boy that had a nice planter of a sort, he threw it in the corner to take his dinner. Maybe at the end of the week there would be about a dozen of these house plants. Some useful and some had to be thrown out. Mm-hmm. And Molly McBride, she was in charge, 98 as they called her. She lived down the Day Road where that thatched house was. It is now a fancy bungalow. She married some boy, I don't mind who it was. Molly McBride was in charge, she was like a sergeant major. But you see, the one down the street, Schutzers, it got at clients. The Royal Arms had what you would call the better client. You'd have John David Watson and Wally Watson, and them kind of men, do you see. Yes. But it would be no dearer than 2 shillings.
What would you have got for your 2 shillings?
Munch meat.
Yes.
Munch and maybe sausages and stuff like that. You'd like it would be I'll tell you this much. There would be a pit of the most beautiful vegetable soup ever you would taste in your life, first of all. Then this munch and spuds and carrots all on the one plate. Then blancmange and jelly or rice and rhubarb or rice and prunes or something like that. And a cup of tea for the 2 shillings.
Mm-hmm. Did very well.
They did very well.
Mm-hmm. And tell in the old days, whenever the town flooded, did you ever get water into the Royal Arms?
Right. The Royal Arms were domestic appliances and park furnishings was an old Belfast roof garage for the sole use of commercial travellers, and I would used to put the travellers' cars in there at night. The cars would have been drier outside now because an old Belfast roof, and it was felted and repaired by the late John James Hall.
Yes, I remember.
You
him
know
well.
who I'm talking
I
about
remember-
now.
I know exactly who you mean.
And it was ready to collapse, and it had propped up and everything else. Well, then over another, there was a shock. Now, just to be vulgar, there was a shock there come down from Johnson Park, an open shock with 2 or 3 bushes. Another side then were scarves, and there was the old air raid shelter was there. Well, to this day, I could quote words of wisdom from somebody older than me, that place, on the other side of that shock where B.O. Boas building is, if John J.R. Porter was alive, he would have claimed that lump of ground, but that was of no interest to me. Scarves walked in on it, and Ivan Brown had umpteen trees lying there for years and years and years, cut trees to be used. Now, when the town flooded and Campsie flooded, the backwater came up and up through that shock. The hotel garage was flooded. The hotel kept pigs, and Andy Cresswell, he used to feed the pigs.
This is Andy that used to live in Campsie.
Yes, deaf, because Brigadier Money had bought Mountfield Lodge, and the Brigadier was interested in pigs, and I can remember this well. Andy was like myself, he had a hearing problem, and the Brigadier wanted to know anyway, something about the pigs, and Andy was shouting to him, and the Brigadier was shouting to Andy and all that. Mrs. Money, she came along, a very nice lady, they say, and the Brigadier forgot himself. He started shouting at her too, and she jumped up at that height of the ground. But I can remember when the hotel got tired keeping the pigs, Joe Hamilton, who worked in the reform stores, got the brock from the hotel. He took on the keeping of the pigs. I had to give Joe Hamilton a hand to get the pigs out and bring them up the yard and put them into what would have been Watterson's stable, or one empty beside it, put the pigs in there.
Would that roughly be where Connor's chemist is today? Was that where the stable would be?
No, right underneath the hotel.
Oh, the stable was underneath.
Yes, where the shops are now,
Yeah.
where you've got that rug. That rug shop was Jimmy Winters's.
Right.
Where Campbell has his shoe shop and whatever, that would be in the vicinity of Watterson's.
Yes.
Horse was stable there. Above that, Al Jackson that had the pub was Gallagher's pub now, that Eddie Sweeney had it up beside McAdam Bates's, Kelly's.
But Tommy, was that pub of Sweeney's not at one stage an entry?
It could have been.
But it wasn't. You don't ever remember an entry?
No,
I
but
always
it was a
understood.
horrible place.
Well, it was very small.
Wild.
Very small. Still is.
Wild, yes. Wild. And I mind Earl Jackson on about the ex-DA or whatever was the police out and smoking the pipe and spitting. Do you have any of these English soldiers? And yes, I do, you know. Oh, they're no good, he says. All they do is suck chocolate and chew cheese, he says. They were no good to him, you see.
Yes.
Now, the flood was a bad story. Getting back to the flood, it flooded right up, I can remember once, right up till darn near the entrance into the ballroom. At one stage, it was getting worse and worse and worse till whatever. They must have cleared the river out and all the rest of it. But it was desperate. All that field where the YM had their tennis courts, and all around that area was a sea of water, and then all the muck that had washed up along with it. You were left with the cleaning up to do.
You remember Tommy Johnson Park being built?
Oh yes, I was working in the Royal Arms certainly, and the smaller houses, they were built by a contractor from Tanragee, Carrickmore, 6 Mile Cross, McCartan's. Well, that was 1938.
And you tell me that there are actually people still living.
Well, Mr. Quinn, Mr. Eddie Quinn, he was the one and only resident, original resident, but all the rest have shifted over the years. Now, he is the one and only. And he can tell me this, that the way into town was only on foot. There wasn't any roadway at all.
That's right. As as you
no
say.
road.
That's correct.
That he had to get a barrow to wheel his furniture when he came to Johnson Park. There was no way of getting a horse and cart or a car or anything like that out. Well, then the bigger houses, these particular houses here, were built in 46 by the late George Macaulay, and he had good weather to build them, and he built them with shingle roofs. Well, these shingle roofs ended up a problem. There were endless fires.
That's right, I remember that.
And they had to be changed. And we had the health centre at that time in Johnson Park. But it is now, since the new North Road has been built, and Johnson Park itself is now a dead end. It's a very peaceful place.
Oh yeah, it used to be very busy.
Very
It used to be
busy
very
indeed.
busy when you had the creamery up here.
Yes.
Do you remember the creamery actually
Yes.
functioning?
Yes, because I used to be sent up from the hotel to get butter and pints of cream. And I have a feeling that the land that the creamery was built on was originally owned by the late John J.R. Porter.
The original owner of the Royal Arms.
Yes,
Hotel,
yes,
Uh-huh.
yes.
Who was the manager of the creamery in your time?
Oh, a Mr. Carson, who lived in Campsie.
Yes. Well, now was
That'd be
Greta
Tommy.
Strange-
Yes,
Greta Strange Valley.
yes.
Yes, that's right. Well, now, what other hotels were there in Omagh when you started in the Royal Arms?
The opposition to the Royal Arms was the Melville, and it was doing very well. The White Hart at the end of this day, and then there was a couple of boarding houses, should we say. Well, there was one small hotel, the Park Avenue, owned by Mrs. Porter. Should be some distant relation of the late John J.R. Porter. Then there was a very good friend who had accommodation over Crawford and Crawford's Mrs. Honeyman, who then married, at that time he was the manager of the bus depots, Mr. Hughes. Well, she was fit to accommodate travellers. You see, at that time, Omagh was very badly off for hotels, because I had, in my duties, well-known travellers to advise them to go out to Dromore, McDermott's, 6 Mile Cross even, to Mrs. Moffat, and any other place that I could recommend, because the hotel was packed to the brim.
Well, now, who owned the Melville in your time? Was it Miss Robinson in those days?
Yes, that's right.
Well, she lived, of course, in Clonavon,
That's right.
which was Dickie's house.
That's right.
And she used Clonavon. of
Yeah,
course.
it's an overflow. I forgot about that now. I'm sorry. You beat me on that one.
And, I mean, there was nearly more accommodation in Clonavon than there was in the
That would be
Melville.
right. That would be right.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Tommy, for speaking to me this afternoon, and I wish you all the best in your retirement after 60 years. is it?
Yes,
60
plus.
years. You haven't really retired yet.
Well, I left it in Mr. Watterson's hands when there was a quiet period about 3 months ago. I says, Mr. Peter, do you feel I should step down and get lost? And he looked into the ground and he says, leave it with me.
But you'll still come to the Rotary Club on the Thursday.
Oh, aye.
I hope you'll not forget us.
Well, I mean, if he says get lost, I have to get lost.
Oh, yes.
But I'm holding on to the Rotary because they're the best friends I've ever had.
Well, they think a lot
Definitely.
of you. Let's put it
And I mean, you put me in a position of very high spot with doing the toast, that particular dinner dance.
Oh, well, that's
That was
that's,
an honour.
Well, we felt
I
that,
don't forget it, like.
No, well, I mean, we don't forget what you've done for us. Thank you very much, Thomas.
Thank you very much.
Is many's a gay night from dark till daylight I spend with people of high renown. But in all their grandeur and heaps to squander, my heart would wander for sweet Omagh Town.